The Boston Celtics are dominating their competition this season, but is that level that they're playing at right now going to propel them to a championship? Good evening and welcome to Boston Balling. I'm your host, Gabby Maljanian, and I am back with Boston Balling. It feels great. Those of you who have been with me since the beginning know that I started this podcast back at the end of 2020, talking all things Boston sports. I've brought on a variety of different guests on the show, including Boston Celtics sideline reporter Abby Chin, because on the theme of what today's show is about, talking about the Celtics, she was great. But I've had a lot of other guests too, talking all things Boston sports. And then in June 2023, when I got hired by the Locked On Podcast Network to host its daily Red Sox show, I kind of had to take a little bit of a hiatus from Boston Balling just due to time purposes. But now I'm back and more determined than ever to make it work to also be doing Boston Balling too, because I certainly did miss talking about the other Boston teams. If you missed the breakdown on yesterday's show, every Monday is going to be Patriots talk, Tuesday Celtics talk, Wednesday Bruins, and Thursday Red Sox, with some special episodes mixed in also. For example, I will be speaking with a woman named Lexi Hastings later on this week, and we'll be dropping a bonus episode that way. Lexi is a big softball and baseball player, played college softball at UConn and then started training for baseball and was recently drafted by the Boston team of the Women's Professional Baseball League. So I will be speaking with her. So make sure to tune into that episode as well. But that's the general format of what we're looking at for this show. And it's a great time to be doing it because it's an exciting time for Boston sports. The overarching theme right now for Boston sports, with the exception of probably the Red Sox, one, because they're not in season, but also because they're having a disappointing off season. That's a conversation for another day. So every other team in Boston right now between these major sports, the theme is exceeding expectations. The Patriots definitely exceeded expectations this year, won their playoff game this past week and are set to host another playoff game this Sunday against the Texans. That should be a good game. Bruins, you can argue, are exceeding expectations this year. And then there's the Celtics, who had lower expectations going into this season because of the fact that Jayson Tatum would be out. And he dealt with a gruesome Achilles tear in May of last year in the middle of the postseason. And that was really, really tough to watch. Heartbreaking situation. But usually for those types of injuries, you expect a player to be out for the entirety of the season. And in this case, that was what people thought. So people were under the impression this was going to be a rebuilding year for the Celtics, on top of the fact that they had traded away Kristaps Porzingis and Jrue Holiday, two key pieces in their championship run from a couple seasons ago. So this felt very much like a rebuilding year, and that the Celtics weren't necessarily going to be competitive in the East. And I thought that they still had a shot of being a playoff team because the Celtics still have a lot of talent on this team. And I was interested in seeing how some of the younger players emerge as talented pieces on this team. But I didn't expect this, where they're at. I thought that maybe they could sneak into the play-in or be a lower seed in the Eastern Conference that gets into the playoffs, but I did not think they would be where they are. They are currently in third place in the Eastern Conference with a record of 24-15. They are one game behind the Knicks, who are 25-14, and then the Pistons are in first place with a 28-10 record. And it's not even far-fetched to say that the Celtics could catch up to the Pistons. They're only a few games behind them right now. So this Celtics team is well on its way to competing and making a deep run. Now, the question is going to be, what is up with Jayson Tatum? Because whether Tatum comes back or not could be a huge factor in what the Celtics do at the trade deadline, which is on February 5th, so not very far away. Now, at this time, they feel like they can be competitive, but it's a matter of how competitive do they feel like they can be without JT. And if they don't feel like they can make a really deep run without him, then they might not make big moves at the trade deadline to really have to give up assets. But if Jayson Tatum does come back to help them make a push, then it's only natural for them to feel like, okay, we want to go big and we want to make the moves necessary to make us a championship caliber team because we have our guy back in JT. Now, my favorite aspect of Jayson Tatum is that he is just so hungry and he cannot stand the thought of not being out there. Cannot stand it. You can see it in his face every single game when he's on the bench that he just hates not being able to go out there and contribute. I love that about the guy. And he has been so ambitious to the point where he is determined to come back. And with an Achilles tear, usually that player is out for the remainder of the season and usually typically following the whole next season. So when the injury happened, we expected that he would miss this entire season. But he had said a while back that his plan is to be back by February. He is optimistic and hopeful that he can be back to basketball activities in February or March. I say baseball because I'm so used to my daily baseball podcast, but he wants to be back to basketball activities by February or March. That's huge. Because if that timeline actually does work out and JT is able to come back for a potential playoff push in that last couple months of the season, that's a game changer. And with where the Celtics are at right now, I wouldn't blame other teams in the Eastern Conference for being very worried about the Boston Celtics and having to deal with them on a regular basis in the playoffs and playing a full playoff series against a team that's already playing well and has Jayson Tatum back. Now, one thing to keep in mind when it comes to basketball is the on-court chemistry. Now, the Celtics have created a sense of on-court chemistry with a team that has a very new identity this season than it did last year. And early on in the season, the Celtics worked really hard to create and develop that identity. And because of the fact that they are at a point where they are playing really well, when Jayson Tatum comes back, there could be a little bit of growing pains involved of figuring out how to best utilize everybody who's there now. And people who have been stepping up in the roles that they're in are comfortable in the roles that they're in. So it's not guaranteed that they're going to continue each individually to play as well as they did at first. I'm not saying they're going to completely fall apart if Jayson Tatum comes back. I'm just saying there could be a period at first in which it's an adjustment period and guys have to fill into new roles than what they're doing right now. But Jaylen Brown, JT's partner in crime, the dynamic duo, people say they're the best duo in basketball. He has really stepped up this season for this Boston Celtics team. He's averaging 29.5 points per game, 6.4 rebounds, and 5.0 assists. And his field goal percentage is 49.5. There are not many games that go by in which Jaylen Brown does not put up at least 20 points. He has been a huge reason for the Celtics' success this year. And it's hard to imagine looking back on a few seasons ago when there were people asking for the Celtics to trade Jaylen Brown because he has just been such a big part of what this team does. And I can't even imagine not having Jaylen right now. And sure enough, as a result, when Jaylen was out in last night's game, the Celtics fell 98-96 to a Pacers team that is now 9-31. So obviously this shows that Jaylen is needed because he is a guy who just provides so much value. And had he been playing, the Celtics probably easily win that game. So Jaylen was listed as out because he was having low back spasms for that game. And he was initially listed as doubtful, so they weren't ruling him out at first, but doubtful likely usually always leads to no. He's missed just 2 games this season, so he's been really healthy. So, God forbid he sits out for a game. He deserves the rest. So he did not play and the Celtics lost. But who was leading the way? Another player who I've been really excited about this season in Payton Pritchard. He led the team in scoring with 23 points in that game to go along with 4 rebounds and 8 assists. He also had 2 steals on the night. And I've always been a huge Payton Pritchard fan. If you follow me on Twitter, you know this. I've been a big Payton Pritchard girl dating back to his college days. When he was at Oregon, I really liked his skill and his athleticism, and I thought he would be a good fit for the Celtics. So I was really happy when they drafted him. And I just, day in and day out, have just grown impressed with his ability to continue to elevate his role, because he used to just be a small bench piece. Then it led to him being the first guy off the bench, and he dominated as that sixth man for the Celtics. And then now it's led to him being in a starting role and being a lot more relied on in that offensive scheme. So I really like what I've seen from Payton Pritchard this season. Sam Hauser and Neemias Queta have also stepped up significantly this season in terms of their roles. Now, Queta had 15 points in the game last night against the Pacers. So he is another one who down low has been a big threat for the Celtics team. Sam Hauser had 8 points and 8 rebounds in the game. So he's been contributing in a lot of different ways this season too. And I really like that as well. You look at Anthony Simons, who was a standout. He had 16 points in the game last night to go along with 3 rebounds and 4 assists. Another thing with Simons is he's been relatively hot and cold, especially earlier on in the season where he wasn't providing much value, but his scoring has significantly improved, and he's been able to be a reliable piece off the bench who's able to score a lot of points. Now, he lacks a little bit in the assists and steals categories, so it says and shows that he isn't necessarily able to contribute in those areas of the game as much as how he's contributing on the scoring side, but his role with this Celtics team has become a lot more valuable as of late because he's been able to score a lot of points. So that's been definitely helpful as of late. Another exciting player on this team is Hugo Gonzalez, who doesn't make the biggest impact on the stat sheet, but he's always a guy who's hustling and is always a guy who's making an impact when he's out there. Jordan Walsh has continued to improve too. For him, to me, the biggest thing is confidence. He is getting more playing time this year than he's ever gotten over the course of his short Celtics career so far, but I can see the intensity and energy that he plays with. And when the Celtics come out sluggish and Jordan Walsh is in the game, he's always the guy putting in that extra effort and energy on the court. And that's what I really respect about a kid like him, is he's hungry, and I only expect good things moving forward from him right now. So the interesting thing about this Celtics team right now is that you have a mix of veterans who have been around the game for a while, but you also have young guys who are blossoming and really developing into their roles as Celtics. And I'm interested in seeing what Brad Stevens thinks of this team and what that means for the trade deadline, because they could definitely use depth at the center position. That to me feels like their biggest need at the trade deadline is that big man to play center. And I'm sure that's something that they will be seeking. But the question that I'll be wondering in Brad Stevens' head is, okay, is this team legitimate? How far can they go? And I do trust Brad Stevens' front office decisions. I mean, he's hit on so many of the moves he's made in his position with the Celtics. And I really appreciate the fact that he is a coach who turned into that GM, because he's really able to understand it from both perspectives of understanding what goes into the process on the court and also now what goes into it off the court, more on the business side. So I really like that he is in the role that he's in. But ultimately, what has led to the Celtics' success so far this season? So they have a really analytical scheme right now, and that approach focuses primarily on offensive rebounding and ball control, and those are biggest things that they've been continuing to preach throughout the season as a whole. So as a result, overall, their strengths are elite offense and impressive depth to go along with a strong overall net rating. And their main weakness is defensive rebounding, as well as the center position's depth, like I mentioned to you, because they are not great with not allowing second chance points. They allow that a lot to teams because they aren't rebounding the ball on the defensive side. So that's something that as a whole, they need to improve on this season. But they have a very electrifying offense that can come alive at any time. And when guys are hitting their shots, it's a little scary. The Celtics do currently boast the second ranked offense in the league and are first in net rating over their last 15 games. Bench production is another thing that I wanted to highlight here because bench production was a previous concern for this team, but it's now become a significant strength when you have guys providing a spark. All those guys I mentioned, Sam Hauser, Anthony Simons, Payton Pritchard, although with Pritchard and Hauser, they are starting a lot, so it's a little bit different now. But even Jordan Walsh, Hugo Gonzalez, who I haven't even fully mentioned a lot of yet, he's another guy who has provided a lot of value off the bench, and Anthony Simons, of course. So when you have guys off the bench who can hit their shots, that will electrify your team and hopefully propel your team to wins on a regular basis. So depth is something that people weren't really sure was going to play out in a positive way this season because it didn't really feel like they had as much of that. But because the bench has been stepping up, it's making this team look like it's in a lot better place. Depth and versatility. This Celtics team is built truly on depth and discipline with a variety of different players capable of contributing on any given night, which really truly helps. 7 players scored in double figures in the Celtics' recent win over the Kings. So it just goes to show that they have guys who can fill roles and guys who can step up. And that's what the best teams are made of, is when you do have guys who can step up and fill different roles due to an injury, especially, and knowing that you can lean on your bench when your starters need some rest to be able to pull their weight. They're also filled with star power at the top. Obviously, when Tatum's healthy and you have that duo of Tatum and Brown, there's no denying the fact that this team is the real deal because Tatum dominates the boards when he's healthy. And when it comes to that weakness of the defensive rebounding, that's something that they're missing without having Tatum there because that's a strength that he provides. And Brown essentially leads the charge, especially this season without Tatum. So those two together are super fun. Defensive prowess overall is good, even despite the rebounding issue on the defensive side of the ball. The Celtics overall have a good defense, and they actually allow the third fewest transition points in the league. So that's something that is very positive that they can hopefully take with them because they are a lot more of a well-rounded team than people might think. Defensive rebounding, obviously a glaring weakness. The Celtics rank 18th in defensive box out percentage and struggle against teams with strong front courts. And also the center position depth/size is something I mentioned. While starting center Neemias Queta has exceeded expectations, that overall positional group is considered the weakness on the roster right now due to a lack of elite size and depth. So that would make them potentially vulnerable against teams like the Thunder, for example, in the playoffs. So that's why adding an elite center would be ideal for the Celtics at the trade deadline. And Jayson Tatum's injury obviously impacts a lot of teams, but him coming back could hopefully help restore a lot of this dominance that we've seen from the Celtics over the last couple seasons. Also, closing out games and quarters. This is something that's been an issue with the Celtics team for a few years now, but it's something that I still worry about. Some fan sentiment has pointed to an inability to close out quarters or maintain large leads. That seems to be a recurring issue. It's been an issue for a few years, and it still happens now. The Celtics will have a big lead going into halftime, and then they'll fall apart in the third quarter or in the fourth quarter, and it will end up being a lot closer of a game than it should have been. And that's not ideal because if you want to compete at the highest level and be able to compete with the best teams in the league, you need to be able to close out games and close out quarters, and that's something that I have an issue with. And the fact that the Celtics still do sometimes panic and throw up threes if their shots aren't falling to try to maintain a lead or get back in the lead or whatever it may be. There is sometimes that idea of panic and everybody's not able to make their shots. So rather than focusing on making good shots, they're just tossing up whatever they get. And I don't agree with that. I think that's a very bad way to go about it. You want to make sure that the shots you're taking are quality shots. and that you are making sure that the shots that you're taking are ones that you're more likely to get into the basket, not panic tossing up threes, but actually going and taking a shot that makes sense. So that's something during those stretches where they're struggling and they're not making their shots or they're giving up a big lead. That's the type of scenario in which I would like to see them take better quality shots as opposed to just panicking and tossing up shots from behind the arc and they're not falling. So when it comes to where the Celtics are at right now, their path to bolstering the front court is definitely something to keep an eye on. Undoubtedly, this team is one of the best stories in the NBA this year, but despite the unexpected success, the center spot is obviously still the weakest positional group. And as they look at potential options ahead of the trade deadline next month, people do believe that the Celtics will try to add another center through the buyout market, not necessarily by making a trade, because they would rather not have to trade any of their pieces and keep the team intact. And it's always smart, even again, with the fact that Queta has really stepped up in his role this year. It's always smart to have options, and it's always smart to add to that depth, especially because, yes, Queta's dominating right now, but what if that changes, or what if he starts to struggle? It's nice to have another option there to turn to. And I think the buyout market certainly is an option that they could go, and they should be adding low-cost insurance at center. That's why the buyout route makes sense as opposed to the trade. And at the top of the show, I alluded to the fact that they may decide based on if Tatum's coming back, if they even want to make trades or not, or if it's worth giving up pieces. And it sounds like to them, they don't necessarily feel like it's worth all of that. A trade would almost certainly require disrupting the rotation or sacrificing assets that the front office does value. And since the Celtics have already proven that this version of the roster without Tatum can still compete at a high level, the goal should be to supplement that instead of trying to reform it and risking breaking chemistry. So the idea of adding somebody via the buyout market, it will be interesting to see if they go that route, because that is something that they certainly could do and is certainly a possibility. And everyone on this team right now seems to understand where shots are coming from, how possessions are supposed to flow, and where the defensive help is coming from. Dropping a new player into that environment is a lot easier if that player knows that he's there to fill a narrow role. And that's where a veteran center can become appealing, because someone who can rebound and survive defensively without needing to be featured is a great piece that the Celtics could add that makes a lot of sense with what they're going for right now. Getting insurance at a low cost is one of the best options that this team has at the moment, because this team genuinely enjoys playing together. You always see the smiles on these guys' faces when they're on the bench together. The team camaraderie, I can't speak to that enough. There is just so much of it. And that's why if a team appears to kind of stand pat at the trade deadline, as people would say, and don't really do much, especially if they're a contending team, people are like, well, if you're trying to compete, why wouldn't you do more? Because if you really felt like you were confident in this team, you would make that happen. But you could also say you feel confident in this team without making those big moves, because that could be saying the opposite of, yeah, we feel so confident in this team to the point where we don't feel like we need to add major impact pieces because we feel like they can handle it on their own. And that's a big compliment and confidence boost for a team like the Celtics, who are already in a good spot in the Eastern Conference. Whereas if you were to say, okay, we're going to add this big piece, then the players might be like, all right, well, they obviously don't trust us that much if they feel the need to do that. So it could be a really good thing. And what Brad Stevens has done so far is really try to find guys who fit with the Celtics system, fit with Joe Mazzulla and his coaching style, and can really just help complement this team to elevate it to another level. So do I feel like the Celtics need to make a trade for a center? No. Do I feel like they need to acquire a center at the trade deadline? Yes. Is the buyout market the way to go? I truly do believe so, because they don't need this superstar center. They need somebody who can do the job and get it done, especially with how well Queta has been playing. Somebody who can split that role with him and can do it cleanly and do it effectively and can rebound, because the rebounding, as we know, on the defensive side of the ball has been an issue. So I am excited to see where things go when it comes to this Celtics team. But overall, I'm feeling really good about where they're at right now. Lots of players contributing and stepping up into roles. And I do feel like their attitudes are a huge part of this, because these guys heard the noise of the offseason. These guys heard that they wouldn't have a shot without Jayson Tatum and that this is going to be a rebuilding year for the Celtics anyway. So they might as well just not even bother. I've heard all of that, and they probably heard all of that too, of, well, this is going to be an off year, but they can focus on 2027. They don't like that. They don't want to hear that. They want to hear, oh, we believe in this team. And they started the season 0-3. So a lot of people at that point were saying, yep, this is how this season is going to go for the Celtics. And Jaylen Brown actually said in an interview early on, he said, we are really asking fans to be patient and give us more than 3 games to figure things out. And he had a really valid point, because it's easy for fans to say, well, this is what we thought, when the results aren't there early on. But it's such a long season. And to Jaylen Brown's point, it took getting used to and adapting to that current level of chemistry that this team has right now. And now they have a mix of guys who are hungry and just want to win. And it's hard to not be excited about that. So I am truly so excited to see where things go from here for this team. Is it going to be tough? Yes. Am I promising a championship? Absolutely not. But what I am promising is that the Celtics are going to be able to put up a fight, and they're going to be able to be competitive, and other people that are not part of the Celtics organization or are not a Celtics fan should be worried about a potentially fully healthy Celtics team with Jayson Tatum in the mix come February or March, because that's pretty scary to think about, is what this team could look like with JT coming back. So we'll have to see how things go there, and whether or not this Celtics team is truly able to hang, we will know come playoff time. But I'm really enjoying the ride right now. Jaylen Brown needs to continue to do his thing. Derek White, a big piece that I mentioned. I've always been a big Derek White fan. I love second half Derek White, because that's when he always seems to turn things on, especially offensively, and is able to make a lot of magic happen in the second half of games. So I really do like what I've seen from Derek White over his time with the Celtics so far, and I'm hoping that that continues. So the biggest keys are going to be health and maintaining this level of chemistry. So don't expect a huge move from the Celtics at the trade deadline, because they are not going to want to mess with this chemistry that they already have. But I also do feel like they will bring in a center of some kind. And whether Tatum comes back in February or March, I think will heavily be determined on where this Celtics team is at that point. If they're in a good position to make the playoffs at that point, I definitely think they will. If it's looking like they might not have a chance to compete this year, then they might not. But we'll have to see how it all goes down. I know I'm really excited, and I'm also excited to have Boston Balling back. Make sure you continue to tune in on any podcast platform. All episodes will be streaming on Facebook and Instagram at 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And then you can also find the episode on any podcast platforms. Make sure you continue to tune in, and I will catch you next time. Let's go Boston Sports.